Well, I'm very excited about our guest today because she is a person from my very own past. We at one point in time did some filming together, and we're both chakra girls. I've written a book about the chakras. She's written many. In fact, she's written 27 books, and she's a huge overachiever because the woman teaches all over the world. She is I'm an author of a lot of books, and she's a delight of a human being. And I'm talking about Cyndi Dale, who will be one of our keynotes at the upcoming conference in May. She is a gifted person. She works on many, many levels, and we're going to let her tell you all about that when she comes on right now. So welcome, Cyndi. Please join us. Have a good day.
Everybody.
How well that worked.
I'm so happy to be here. That was magic. I came right at that moment.
You did. We willed you into existence.
You certainly did. That's what energy is about. Not always that spectacular, but it works.
Yes, it does. Speaking of which, Cyndi, you've done so many interesting things and written so many interesting books. And I think it's always kind of fun for the audience to know, what were you like as a kid? Did you have any of this ability then? Were you seeing people? Were you seeing energies? Tell us a little bit about how this all began.
I was one of those odd children, maybe sort of like a changeling. I think my parents started to wonder, did we really do this ourselves, or is she a throwback? So you know what? I was one of those really intuitive little kids. I could hear spirits or ghosts. I saw colors coming off my parents or other people. I would get a sense of their feelings. Like I always knew when my dad came in the room, even if I couldn't see him, if he was angry or sad, and the same with my mother. So I was really a sensitive. And I still remember one experience where I was laying asleep at night and I saw these shadows at the hallway, and I heard two men come in the house. We lived in Huntsville, Alabama. There was a railroad behind us, and we called them hobos. The hobos would, kind of get on the cars and travel or whatever. And I knew the hobos came in my house. I heard them. They made breakfast. There was a skillet with bacon frying, and then they left the house. And I was like, oh, I was terrified the whole time, of course. And the only thing I could think of when they left is like, they didn't do the dishes. My mom. And so I ran into my parents' room, and like, the hobos were here. They cooked breakfast. They didn't do the dishes. And my mom rolls her eyes and rolls over like, here she goes again. And my dad takes me by the hand, and we go into the kitchen. And of course it's spick and span, not even a bit of an eggshell. And that's the kind of kid I was. So I'm not sure they knew what to do with me.
So I have a silly question. What was it? Was it spirits that were in the house, do you think?
They were spirits. I'm positive they were souls, probably deceased souls, who had, decided to remain, kind of in an etheric form, if you would, in a subtle energy form. I think the cool word now is subtle energy, in more of a subtle, less measurable form, and they visited my house. And I don't know if they knew I was hearing them or not, but it was very quiet, of course. I was clinging to the bed and the pillow. So I do believe they were ghosts. And so to me, like, we'd go to Sunday school, Norwegian, white Wonder Bread Sunday school. And none of that was surprising to me. Of course, Jesus could heal somebody. Of course, prophets did this, or people could divine in a cup. So it didn't make sense to me why, if it's okay in the Bible, why it's so weird in the world.
What a great statement. What a great statement.
So, Cyndi, we weren't planning on talking about this, but I feel like it's coming up. I've had clients, and I'm sure there may be people listening to this who are sensitives, who get this who have psychic experiences, and they have no language for it. Sometimes people say they're crazy, whatever. And I'm curious, as someone who's taught this, lived this so long, what would you say to that person? What resources should they do? Should they avail themselves of, so they can discern whether or not they're they're crazy, or whether or not they're tuning into this kind of stuff.
Exactly, because you want to know the difference between, and this sounds sort of rude, but psychic and psycho, right? Or,
Cute.
or I know,
Psychic to psycho, right?
I know, quote me on that one.
Yeah.
Or what's valid or fantasy. I mean, we can get a psychic vision, say in a dream, an intuitive vision, and then, we follow it, but was that our brain creating it? Or is that a real visitation? Is that coming from spirit? Or is it leftover meatloaf, that just gave us something that's not worthwhile? It's a really tough question. And I think it's an important one. And it's an ongoing issue of concern, even if you are like me and you use your intuition for a living. So I would say, first of all, get some valid books. Google some books, look at some books, learn the science, like of quantum physics or of subtle energy, as well as the phenomenon of science and, of all this sort of energetic stuff. Look at studies. Healing Touch program has some good studies. Daniel Benner has some studies, so I think it's really important that you figure out, first of all, that it's real, and in what way is this not magical and real. And in order to learn that, you need to study the people who have been spiritists or spiritual or intuitives or healers or shamans, and you need to get your hand on some of the science of it as well. Yes. And then you need to figure out how you do it, because most of my clients are too intuitive. They get too much data. And
right.
So
that and it overwhelms them.
It's overwhelming because you want to live a real life. I mean, I live a real life. I make my dinner, I walk my dogs, I go to the mall, and I don't know what people are thinking, and I don't want to know what they're thinking. So we in some ways don't even have the right to do psychic spying. Like, people get their own business and we get to have our own business. So it's vital to learn about energetic boundaries. To learn about those, you may need to learn about chakras, auric fields, meridians, and some even psychotherapy techniques, energy psychology techniques, that will help you develop a way to just be you, so you aren't always being others.
Wait, let me ask this, because I don't know all of your 27 books. Is there one that someone might avail themselves of, that you've covered any of this kind of material?
I would say subtle energy techniques. I have a little book of chakras, and then I would also get my subtle energy technique books. It's very, very small. I have a book on chakras at 1,200 pages. I wouldn't start there. No, it's fascinating. It's chakras from around the world.
People need some sense of, okay, give me the
subtle energy techniques. It's a little book, and it'll tell you what is energy, what's subtle energy versus physical energy. They're sort of one and the same. You need to respect both. And it's techniques for putting together boundaries, knowing who you are in a situation, teaches you, how to be grounded is a big word in this field, how to be down to earth, how to be in your body, how to say yes and no to what's around you.
Perfect.
That sounds perfect. I'm going to get that one myself tomorrow. And I imagine we can get all these books on Amazon, right?
Yeah, Amazon has everything. Amazon's great.
Isn't it the best? It's the best. I was telling somebody, I did my radio show earlier today, and I was saying that back in the day when I first wrote my first chakra book in 2002, you had to walk with a stack of books from bookstore to bookstore to see if they would carry your books, if you were self-published, and now God bless Amazon, because we can all get everything.
Yep, it's all under one roof, isn't it? It's great.
Yes, beautiful. One of the things I've always loved about your work is that you combine both science and subtle energy work. And the keynote you're doing at the conference is being called The Energetics of Trauma and the Healing Power of Light. So can you tell us a little bit about that energy versus light, science versus physiology, how you're combining those kinds of things?
Absolutely. Well, and I'll start with trauma, because trauma is physiological. When we go into a stress response, there's certain events that occur in the body, and they happen to everybody, even animals, and to some extent plants. It's just a different set of mechanisms. So when we go under stress, the bone marrow produces osteocalcin, the adrenals do cortisol, adrenaline, the hypothalamus does this, the polyvagal system does this. So short-term stress is pretty predictable what's going to happen. But trauma is stress that settles in, and it sort of fixates us in whatever it is that stressed us. And that has a long-term causation and creates disabilities and challenges in the physical body. And, you know, being an energetic, a subtle energy practitioner, I work through my body, I work with people's bodies, and I help them with their bodies and their everyday lives. They need to be able to get up and go to work. They need to be able to drive in a car if they've had an accident and be able to not trigger and be in the car. So for instance, I just finished a book on trauma, the energetics of trauma, you know, and it's half about the body, what happens physiologically. But what's missing when we just do the science and the physical and the traditional medicine is that we're also made out of subtle energy. We're made out of light and sound, really. So I like to say we're made out of light, sound, clay, and soul. All right. But isn't that kind of cool? But we aren't just physical. Most of us is actually subtle, which is just less easy. It's not as easy to measure. And so when we go through a traumatizing or a stressful experience that gets stuck and we get stuck in it, it's because there's also these invisible energies or charges that enter the body, they get stuck there and cause havoc. Right? And so because we're primarily made out of, from an energy perspective, light and sound, you know, we can get so-called light or EMF that comes in that disturbs us, so-called mechanical waves of sound that come in and disturb us. We can create words that are sound that keep us stuck. All kinds of stuff happens inside of us. And so why then shouldn't we be able to use light, which is mainly really actually what we're made of, to actually to help heal us? So because we're just oscillating fields of light and oscillating fields of sound. So we need to use what we're made out of to help us.
Yes, I understand that concept completely. And I think there are many new methods and products even out in the market coming where people are finally getting aware light is what we need to heal. But you talk about 3 kinds of light. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, this is where I probably go up the deep end a little bit for, for some of your traditional scientists, but all of this information actually comes from science. So I work with 3 types of light. I have my own names for them, and they're backed by cosmological or scientific studies, whether they're classical or quantum physics, etc. So the one that I'm the most enchanted with, I call absolute light, because there's absolute light. There's evidence that there's still light in our universe, our expanding universe, that existed before the Big Bang. And it's there in these twists in the universe. It's in dark matter. And what's neat about that light is it doesn't have opposites. It's just what it is. It's sort of a static, still light. Second type of light I work with is virtual light, and there's many complicated definitions for it. It has to do with wave fluctuations, but the easiest way to understand virtual light are their choices. It's like what could exist if we could but call it or focus on it. So that's the light of possibilities. That's the light that comes to light, like if we sort of focus the right way or do the right things, or we can imagine something super cool and then take the practical steps, we can create something new with virtual light.
So that sort of fits in with the idea of maybe the multiverse. Or...
It's the multiverse. It's what shamans work with. It's the Lynn McTaggart information about the field, or what we do with the vacuum. You know, that there's all this light in a vacuum or a black hole. But, you know, if we use consciousness, it can stir. You know, if we can see something, you know, there's particles, they're really waves in, you know, 2 or more places at once, but we have to focus on it to make it appear in 3D reality. So that's what virtual light or particles, which are really waves.
The third kind of light?
The third one is polarity light. And this is the stuff we all studied forever. It's matter. It's what matter is made out of. But it's polarity because for everything in the world that has matter, like an electron, like an electron always has its opposite charge. For every electron, there's a positron. For matter, there's antimatter. And this is what we work with most of the time, whether it's psychological or physiological. We're usually in that world of working with what's, seemingly a bit more measurable. But why not use all kinds of light? Why not use absolute for like spiritual directives or to get a really strong sense of our true identity? Why not virtual to create new possibilities? And certainly we also need to be practical, and make the mechanics of the real world work for us too.
Mm-hmm. Are any of these lights synonymous with scalar light?
Yeah, they actually are. I believe that it's scalar waves that connect the three different types of light.
Ah.
Right. So those are sort of the carrier waves that help us bring absolute into 3D or disappear from 3D back into virtual, what we don't want. And so scalar waves are a really important function in kind of putting this sort of idea together.
Sort of like a tram going between stations.
Right, exactly. They're the elevators. The scalar waves are the elevators. And those are longitudinal waves. They're sort of really neat waves that can go around corners and go through mass. So,
So if we were since you're going to be talking about trauma and there are people watching or listening, right now this is a little up in the air. Let's try to, maybe we can bring this down a tad. How might, like if somebody has, I don't know, if you're working with trauma, how might we use what you're, these three different lights that you're talking about? How might someone?
So maybe in a specific scenario, like someone who was just robbed or, just had a shocking thing happen to them.
Exactly. So let's say they want to work with all three types, all right, of light. So on that polarity connection, maybe what they want to do is actually talk to somebody. I mean, you can use this in everyday reality as well. So polarity light is where you look at both sides of a situation. That'd be a very practical way to do it. And you go, this is what's negative, kind of, this is what I'm learning from this. This is what led to this. Maybe you work with some of the emotions, etc. Or say you do tapping work. Like you can do tapping or meditation. So you focus on what's harmful, what's negative, and you give yourself some time doing tapping or doing meditation or doing journaling or whatever to try to see if you can pull some wisdom out of the situation. I'm not saying we deserve to be abused, but you work with both sides of the coin. Virtual reality, again, you can use tapping, meditation, journaling, hands-on techniques, focus on a chakra, kind of sit and connect with spiritual guides. It depends on what your way of doing things might be. And you want to create new possibilities. Let's say instead of triggering, you want to do tapping or meditating or again, talk to a therapist or a friend and just say, what are some other possible ways to look at this situation? What can I create from it? How do I bring virtual light through my body when I'm tapping? You just focus on it. You just say, I want to create new possibilities. So I'm going to focus when I'm tapping on bringing virtual light through. Or you see a shaman and they do some drumming, and they say, let's look at some other ways you can go with what's happened to you. Other ways to see this, do this, be what led to it, etc. Light, again, praying, meditating, sitting in stillness. When we go to the absolute, what we're focusing on is our own soul or our own spirit. We want to get to a place of stillness. We want to get to a place where we don't shame ourselves, but we say the healing power of the absolute light is love. I'm going to receive love while I'm tapping. I'm going to receive love while I'm meditating. I'm going to receive love in those parts of myself that are traumatized, that are triggered. I'm going to do that when I'm triggered in reality. When I have a situation that comes up that scares me, I'm going to stop. I'm going to say, I need the absolute light of love. I'm going to let myself fill with that. I'm going to not judge the fact that I'm triggering, and I'm going to get love to heal my neurons, to heal my connective tissue where my memories are stored. So those are a few of many, many sort of mechanical ways we can use those three types of
So
light.
let me ask you, before we talked, before we were talking about this conversation I had with the scientist, but that's where it's coming from. Is this, so you're using the term light, but it also, the way you're describing it, it almost sounds more as a metaphor or an intention or a position. Now, you don't need the concept of light per se. But then again, maybe in your mind, so I'm curious about that, number one, or do you actually sort of visualize light or do something energetic that has a different quality? So for instance, like having a white light meditation, you're surrounded in white light or whatever. I'm curious about that for you, because it sure sounds to me like part of it is more of a way of looking at it and organizing the intention.
That is what it is. It's perception. It's perception. And, it comes down to what are we made of? We are composed of, and we interact with the world through sound and light. So you could use the word sound too, but I use light because it's more available, and there's more studies, that the body itself is electrical, and electricity produces electromagnetic activity and electrical activity and magnetic activity, but it produces light. So everything about us suggests that we are light machines, all right? And everything that interacts makes sound as well. So I mean, like, quite literally, that we are made of different types of electromagnetic activity. And I'm not only talking about gamma rays versus radio waves versus X-rays versus visible light, this or that. Like, I'm kind of institutionalizing light, in different scientific understandings of it, so we can apply it in a really practical way. So why wouldn't a medical doctor say, oh, this person, kind of has a broken elbow, and, there is where the light fabric that needs to be, connected is disconnected. So why wouldn't we start to make those bridges? We're using infrared, far infrared electromagnetic activity to stimulate bone growth. So why not go another level and say, like, if we're literally made out of light, why can't we work from that perspective? We already do with machines. Why can't we do that with our minds too? Why can't we do that with our imaginings as well? And then perpetuate healing or transformation the same way. Personally, I can visualize light. I'm very visual. Like, from an intuitive point of view, I'm really visual, but not everybody's visual. So you can feel it, you can sense it, you can just, ask for it. There's, depending on your style of knowing, we have to kind of develop how we're going to do it. More kinesthetic people, tapping is fantastic, because you can just say, I want virtual light to create new possibilities, because I've been stuck in this trauma for too long. I can't get out of it. I don't know what to do. I can't see men a different way, or women a different way, or my parents a different way. So why not just state, okay, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to ask that virtual light be activated when I'm doing this exercise.
Mhm.
I pretty much guarantee you'll feel it. I work on the phone with people. I mean, I don't even work in person that often. I work on the phone with people, and they feel the shifts. They get twitches, they go cold, they get hot, they get butterflies in the stomach, their face flushes, they have things heal, they have different perspectives. So I don't think it's quite as woo-woo as it can sound, because fundamentally we are made out of EMF and units of it, and we're made out of sound.
Amazing. So just for clarity's sake, Cyndi,
Yeah.
light and energy are not exactly synonymous. Light is a form of energy?
Light is a form of energy.
Okay.
Exactly. And, we're starting to get into now discussions about frequency versus mass, right?
Yes.
Because you can have mass can't go beyond the speed of light, because it gets too heavy and it just can't get there. All right. It's sort of like if I eat the whole time I'm going through a state fair, I'm never going to get back to my car. It's just not going to happen. But light can be seen as frequencies, right, that are coded, and frequencies can potentially move faster than the speed of light or slower than what we can measure. So I'm talking, kind of from that perspective, where we're not so bound by what doctors can successfully do or not.
Right. Beautiful. So if you were to say a couple of sentences about your keynote and why people should be there to see it, what would that be?
I think it's come and learn how to free yourself from any prisons and learn how to easily help other people do the same. Learn the concepts behind it, but then we're going to make it simple too.
Yes.
The other thing I know you're going to talk about, which it doesn't sound like from this part so far, is you're also really familiar with, the more standard things like, polyvagal theory or, so, and again, it's not, as I know you're going to be talking about, it's not either or that you.
It is not either or, because like when I work with my clients, I'm very aware that, say, for instance, one of the things that, I've studied polyvagal theory and, put it together with other theories as well. So for instance, when somebody has a really critical state of trauma, so they develop autoimmune dysfunctions, of any sort, or fear reflexes that they can't stop. You have inflammation in the body. I mean, you have measurable inflammation, and there's certain processes in the body that are part of that. For instance, there's an overproduction of mast cells. Those are these sort of immune cells that are produced in the bone marrow. And when we're stressed and we can't get out of our stress, and then we especially keep getting stressed, which is called life, is it not? Okay. Like the body produces too many mast cells. And then we keep on producing other, sort of really, they end up being toxins that make it so we can't get out of neurological responses, like our sympathetic nervous system and certain aspects of the parasympathetic nervous system that keep us constantly in excitatory hormones. So we're exhausted and then we can't sleep. So I find the body component of stress and trauma, it has to be discussed. My work is more in the subtle when I'm working with clients, because I think that's the missing ingredient in much of the therapeutic processes or the medical processes. They're just not as aware of the subtle components. Right. So if I can help clients with the subtle, it can help them work kind of more concretely also in the physical. It can help them make better diet choices. It can help them figure out what to do with their microbiome. It can help them use different vagus techniques to calm their body. But, I think the subtle is the missing ingredient.
I'm listening to you talk. It's really interesting. What I'm hearing is that I think that, first of all, with trauma, that we get into this vicious cycle, like you said, right? And so, for instance, the more stress, the more you have more mast cells. And one of the reasons you have more stress if you have a trauma disorder is you begin to perceive everything that way. So it just builds and builds and builds. And it's almost impossible. You can't tell someone, oh, just stop that.
You can't. Yeah. You can't because they're in shock. Right. The part of them that goes through the trauma, right? If that part of them is not enabled or helped, or they can't deal with their feelings, there's all these physiological responses, and also those connect into the psychological, right, where they're in the trauma still. They're still in that trauma. You're not going to tell somebody who's being beaten up, or who's losing their house to a tornado, or who's not getting what they need from their mother, right? You're not going to tell them, oh, just think your way out of it. They're in the trauma. And that's the part that I think I feel very strongly about is, we get trapped in our trauma. There's true, neurological and chemical ionization reactions that catch us and trap us in a trauma, like in parts of our body. There's also subtle or less measurable energies that trap us in the trauma. And so it can actually be quite complicated. You need to reach the part of the person who's still in the trauma. You need to help them. You need to help them feel safe. You need to help them with the physical, but you also need to help them with the subtle. So they can create mechanisms whereby they know that if they let go of the subtle traumas, if they let go of the barriers, if they start to perceive things different, they're going to be safe. Because sooner or later, we start to think we're only safe if we stay stuck in the traumatized reactions.
And that's what I'm hearing, that if you work on the subtle, and you can almost call that small little bits,
They're small little bits. Exactly.
that then the person can begin to slowly unwind, and the body will naturally take over.
Exactly. Exactly. It'll naturally take over, and or all the great things somebody can do psychologically or physically can start to work if they haven't been before. You know, because if that person is stuck, I mean, one of my more extreme ideas, but it plays itself out in my work over and over, is you actually ingest other people's subtle energies. Like if I get hit by a baseball, which God knows my son is in baseball, I never have. So I'm not trying to call that to myself. If I'm hit by a baseball, I'm certainly going to have physiological damage and I need to work with it. Maybe, you know, get massage, maybe do this, maybe do that, whatever it is. But let's say the kid throwing that baseball is angry at his dad. Guess what? Even therapists will tell you you can ingest other people's feelings. So but they just don't explain how. I like to talk about how. Well, there's those little tiny bits of anger that go into my body. So I'm hit on the head, but I can't work it through, even if it was minor. So is somebody else's anger still stuck in me? Or did that stir up my own anger about something? So let's talk shop. Let's talk subtle, and we can help flip physical.
Well,
Brilliant.
I know you guys are going to be shocked, but I'm looking at the clock. We're actually at the end, because we're like we're just warming up. I'm like, I'm only in second year.
I love this stuff. This is passion.
So that's okay. That's why you have a 90-minute talk, but we have to stop for now. So I just want to thank you, Cyndi. This has been awesome. This is great, and hopefully people are intrigued about this, and they might want to come to the conference or buy a book. Your new book is coming out soon, right?
I think it's in June. It's Energetics of Trauma. Yep. It's already listed, I think, on Amazon. So it's getting a lot of buzz already. I'm such a geek. I was like, is anybody going to really want this book? And like even foreign publishers are pre-ordering. I'm like, other geeks out there. There's good geeks out there.
Well, and the way you explain it, it feels very accessible, Cyndi. You know, it doesn't feel too out there or too difficult to understand. Like, I can't wait to get a hold of it myself. And I will most definitely be at that conference because I want to hear your talk.
I'm excited to see you. I'm excited to see you too, Bob. I'll see you in May.
That's right. Looking forward to it.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for being with us. And we will be back in 2 weeks with another wonderful episode of Higher Energy. See you soon.
Bye all.
Bye. Thanks, Cyndi.